Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election video. To my next video, essentially. This is going to be an election analysis video, but it's not in it. Well, it is going to be about the 2022 Senate elections, the midterms for the Senate. But it's not going to be one of my next prediction. Think of it as kind of a guide to my next prediction. And so essentially what I'm going to be talking about here is the margins of victory in the Senate elections, or at least the predicted margins of victory that I have predicted. And what the margins of victory for these races were back in 2016. And I'm going to basically explain how those Senate races in 2016 ended up in relation to the presidential level. So, obviously, as you probably know by now, in 2016 was a very good year for the Republican Party, I almost said the Democratic Party. Not good for the Democrats that much. While obviously Donald Trump unexpectedly won the presidency for the Republicans, not expected, and he was able to sweep a lot of these swing states. As you can see, he won Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas. Texas was technically a swing state in 2016, more so in 2020, and he also won Arizona. Whereas Democrats weren't able to pick up that many swing states. They only picked up really Nevada, Colorado, Maine, New Hampshire, Minnesota, and Virginia. Those were really the only swing states that they won. But if you look at the Senate elections, uh, first of all, before I say anything else, 2016 was quite a year because it was the first time in over 100 years, which since the passing of the 17th Amendment, which, if you don't know, basically mandated that senators be elected by the population, just like the presidential election, because previously they were elected by state legislatures. Well, this was the first time that a Senate cycle, that all the Senate races in a Senate cycle during a presidential election year had the same result for each party as it did as they did on the presidential level. And while this happened, there were a lot of discrepancies. As you can see, the map looks a lot different. You can see that even though Trump won Arizona by 3.5%, John McCain won by 13%. In Missouri, you see kind of a contrast. You can see Missouri, Roy Blunt only won by 3%, but Trump won it by 19%. In Wisconsin, you can see that Ron Johnson won by 3.4, but Trump won by just 0.7. In Pennsylvania, you can see that Pat Toomey only won by 1.4, but Trump only won by 0.72. And the list goes on. You can see Georgia was a lot redder in the Senate elections. So was North Carolina, Florida, Missouri, Kentucky, Indiana. Were some exceptions, and some other races that went much redder than they did on the presidential level. The most obvious is Iowa, or our Iowa, and Ohio. Ohio, there was Rob Portman, who won by 21 points, and in Iowa, there was Chuck Grassley, who won by 24 points. So as you can see, for Republicans, there was quite a bit of difference between. They were really, most of them were able to easily or not so easily outperform Donald Trump in some way. And obviously, not every Senate. It's very hard for obviously, it's very rare that a Senate election and a presidential election happening in the same year have the exact same margin of victory. It's very rare. But usually it is. But in today's standards, it is not very far from. They are not very far apart. You can see this happening with Democrats too in Colorado, where Michael Bennet won by 6 points, but Hillary Clinton only won by 5 points. You can also see this in New Hampshire, even though this is an extremely small difference, very small. Maggie Hassan only won by 0.14%. Hillary Clinton won it by a slightly larger margin, by 0.4%. And that's just talking a few tenths of a percent, which is not a big deal. But as you can see, there was a lot of Democratic either underperformance or outperformance compared to Trump. Trump was really kind of an anomaly when it came to It was really he was really kind of an anomaly in the presidential election. So was Hillary Clinton for both parties, and as you can see, a lot of states, some states that went for Trump heavily, like Indiana and Kentucky, were fairly close. In Indiana, of course, Mike Pence was Trump's running mate, so he was expected to easily win the state. Indiana also has a very strong Republican nature. Um, but in the Senate race, Todd Young only won by 10 points. And of course, this was against Evan Bayh, who previously held this seat. But still, it was, you could say the same thing when you look back even further in 2010 when you see Dan Coates won it by 15 points. In Kentucky, which is one of the reddest states in the nation, Rand Paul, I'm sure you've heard his name. I don't think I really need to explain him. Um, in Kentucky, Trump won by nearly 30 points, but Rand Paul only won by 15 points. He didn't even crack a safe margin. He didn't crack 15%. He just got 14.5, or he not, well, no, he got 57% of the vote. This is relating, I'm talking about margins of victory. He wasn't even able to crack a 15% margin of victory. So all that aside, how does this affect the midterms? Well, a lot of the thing is that most of these differences were due to special incumbents. For example, in Iowa, even though it had been a very, very competitive state in the presidential election, or at least it was supposed to be, and had been a competitive state in many years past, Chuck Grassley was able to win by this extremely large margin. And a part of that it goes back to his history. If you go back even further, if you go back to 1980, that was the last time. That was the only time he won by anything less than 15 points. And even then, this was against an incumbent. He won his first election with a 53% of the vote and by an 8-point margin. That's pretty impressive for a challenger. As you can see, he had won very strong victories. And while 2016 was a lot closer than some of his previous victories, it was still a fantastic performance, really, especially in comparison to Donald Trump, who uh, easily swept the state as well. But one of the things that but what I mean by this is when you see these very popular long time or not so long time incumbents, or unpopular incumbents, winning by either larger or lesser margins than Trump. This includes Democrats, or winning by less or more than Hillary, vice versa. Um, you can see that a lot of those incumbents, at least on the Republican side, are retiring. I'll show you guys a map of this. As you can see, there are 6 Republican retirements. One of them is a special election, so that does not necessarily relate to 2016, because that relates to an election, a special election because of a resignation, but that's besides the point. So you can see in Missouri, Roy Blunt, who was very unpopular, is retiring. You can see Ohio, Rob Portman, who is actually very popular and won by 21 points, is retiring. In Pennsylvania, even though he didn't win by much, Pat Toomey did outperform Donald Trump and win in a race that he did not expect to win. He's retiring too. In North Carolina, you guys saw Richard Burr's margin. You don't need to know that. Alabama is obviously a very red state, and Richard Shelby is retiring, so I don't think I really need to talk to you about that. Now, a lot of these incumbents, as you can see, are staying. Most Democrats are staying in the Senate that are up for re-election. The only one is Patrick Leahy in Vermont, who I don't really need to talk about. He's not really relevant to this situation. But when you see Republicans underperforming in Kentucky in 2016 with that large swing, that large difference, you don't usually see that anymore. And so and since Kentucky has been very Republican, trending very Republican, hasn't voted for a Democrat since 1996 when Bill Clinton narrowly carried it. um, Anyways, to see Rand Paul only win by 15 points is quite surprising. If you do look at 2010, he did win by only 11.5%, which is not good either. And you can see that he did make an improvement relative to that year. It still was not enough, especially when there was a presidential candidate who easily won the state. And I think that that's definitely going to affect the midterms. If you do look at Rand Paul's race in particular in Kentucky, he is not facing that strong of a race. Um, of course, in terms of a Senate race, not in terms of relating to Charles Booker, the Democrat who's running. I didn't mean that. As you can see, for a while, this was expected to be a safe Republican race, not because of Paul himself, but because Kentucky was so red. But as you can see in this latest poll, or in this poll from January, Paul did, and there's a the very small amount of undecided voters. So keep that in mind. So you can see Paul wins 55% of the vote, and Charles Booker wins 39% of the vote. Now that's still a safe margin, but that's only 16 points. And considering this was before Roe v. Wade was the Roe v. Wade leak happened, I do believe that this race could possibly go down to likely. And I'll give you a little spoiler alert. In my prediction, I have moved Kentucky down to likely, and that will be something I talk about whenever I make that video. When it comes to other races, some of these incumbents sadly died before their terms expired. Those include Arizona with John McCain and Johnny Isakson with Georgia. John McCain's really the only one that died in office. He died from brain cancer. I'm sure you all know that. Um, in Johnny Isakson's case, he resigned from the Senate, but due to health issues, and he did recently pass away outside of the Senate, or when he was out of the Senate. So there's a little bit of a difference there, but still, these were unexpired terms. They're now both held by Democrats, and they're expected to be a lot more competitive because Georgia and Arizona have, of course, made significant shifts towards the left in recent years. But you can also see how when Democrats are in such a bad position nationally, and you see some of these incumbents like Chuck Grassley running for an eighth term, even though he will be 89 this year, you can start to see why Democrats will be worried about their chances at the Senate. And while I do think that Roe v. Wade's I guess overturning is the right word, I think that's definitely going to help Democrats. It's definitely helped me, um, you know, uh, think a little bit more in their favor. Think about the voters that are going to be voting for them, and not that I don't, but just that it helps me kind of, think about how um, how those voters are going to go and how they're going to affect the races. I can tell you Kentucky is definitely one of those races that's going to be affected by Roe v. Wade. Um, well, maybe not, because Kentucky is a pretty pro-life state, but still, it's not like any state is either 100% pro-life or pro-choice. Um, but yeah, that's essentially all I have for you guys today. I kind of am rambling now, but as you can see, the main point of this video is really it contrasts, the difference between how the Senate elections from 2016 translated into the presidential election. You can see some either significant or not so significant increases or decreases. I know I focus mainly on Republicans in this video, but that's because Republicans won most of the competitive races in 2016. Democrats only got Nevada, Colorado, New Hampshire, and Illinois. Illinois was only competitive because they had a Republican incumbent there, but still Tammy Duckworth beat him by 15 points, and Illinois is not going to go red in 2022. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hit the like button if you did. Subscribe to my channel. Check it out. I will be coming out with the 2022 U.S. Senate election predictions, or then my next prediction for the Senate election soon. Unless something happens, I will continue to monitor the data until I release it. It's primary season. Finally, we are finally getting to see who is going to be facing off against each other, Democrats and Republicans, obviously, but who in those parties are going to be their nominees for both Senate and governor elections, or gubernatorial elections. Speaking of that, I will also be making a video on that. And finally, check out my friend Growlin Zeus 666's channel. He makes really good videos too. Also, check out my other channel, Interactor127, which is my main channel and probably what you guys all know me from. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.